The new witness in the Meyiwa murder trial, Constable Sizwe Zungu, has dropped a bombshell. It's regarding the night that the Bafana Bafana captain was killed. Zungu says he was with all the accused on that fateful day and that 3 of the accused disappeared for a while and came back carrying 2 firearms, one of which belonged to him. Well, how did all of this happen? Linda Mnisi joins us in studio to unpack this further. Linda, you're going to have to give us the context here so that we're able to understand how this constable and his association with the accused in this matter actually comes about.
So, Constable Zungu, Kathy, describes a situation where he was invited to the hostel by one of his nephews. This is his brother's son, who invited him over, telling him that another family member would be coming to Joburg and that they would be coming together to the hostel. He says he arrived in the afternoon and what he found there, it was a hive of activity. People were basically happy. They were having lots and lots of meat. There was alcohol. Some of them were even dancing. He describes a very busy, and chaotic scene there at the hostel. And he says he found some of the accused, some of which he knew through their nicknames, by their nicknames rather. He says accused, for example, accused number 2, accused number 3 was known as Gada. Accused number 5 was also known to him as Nkani. He says at that particular time, they then were chatting together, drinking together, and then the accused disappeared for a while. And at around 8:30 to 9 o'clock, they came back hastily, rushing to his nephew's bedroom. And then he followed them because they looked shocked. He followed them in the bedroom. When he got inside, the light switched off. It was then put back on, and when he realized that these 2 accused had firearms on their hands, and, he got suspicious what was happening. And then he asked his nephew where his firearm was, because he's a police officer and had come to visit the nephew who had given his firearm, his work firearm, to put safely in his bedroom. He then says, "Where's my firearm?" They give him his firearm, then ask him to excuse them while they have a meeting. Accused 4 and 5 then arrive, Kathy. They arrive and the meeting continues. They then come back, and that's when accused number 1 says, "Have you heard that Sizwe Meyiwa died?" And he says, "Well, I poured cold water because I looked at my phone, I checked my social media, and there was nothing of that sort." It was only confirmed to him the following day through media reports. And on Tuesday, he found out through the media reports that the descriptions that the media was giving actually matched the people that he was with at the hostel.
Linda, this takes us back to the question of this firearm story. The reason why he's talking about his firearm potentially having been involved is that, of course, there is a risk currently that it could well have been his firearm that was also used in this matter.
Yeah, especially because, Kathy, if you remember, he says he got there, he gave the firearm to his nephew, and then he only asked after the 3 men had come into the house about where his firearm was. He even goes as far as saying, "I even smelt it to check whether it was used." But you'll also remember, we've heard evidence previously from other witnesses and ballistics experts and police officers that the firearm that was recovered from accused number 3 during his arrest in 2015, when he was arrested for the murder of an Alexandra taxi boss, was in fact the firearm that was now linked to the murder of Sizwe Meyiwa. So in this particular regard, we haven't heard any information or evidence that links his work firearm to the murder.
I can imagine that it will also raise eyebrows that you have a police officer that is acknowledging to having a relationship with these individuals who, of course, by and large, at least if the state's case is to be believed, have been involved in criminal activity for some time now.
Yes, especially because he raises a question, or he makes a point around how there were firearms, and he asked his nephew, "Oh, you're still doing this firearm thing again," which gives a sense that he might have been aware of some things that may have happened in the house. Of course, we await for cross-examination where some of the things will potentially be touched on, but the following day, he makes no mention of him having gone to report to the police. It's only at a later stage, as his suspicion mounted, that he actually realized that, in fact, the people that were in that particular house, in that hostel at the time that I was with, the people that I know, some of whom are my neighbors, because he describes accused number 1 as his neighbor, and he knows accused number 2 from Nongoma. He says those people, looking at the descriptions that have been given, are the people that actually killed Sizwe Zungu. In fact, at a later stage, he then said, after having collected evidence or having collected information, I was then certain that the people who did this were the people I was with.
The next question which arises, Linda, is what did he do following the fact that he clearly had these suspicions, and as a police officer, of course, it is incumbent on him to ensure that where there are suspicions, he actually follows through. He knows the law.
Absolutely. He talks about a certain stage, at a later stage, where he then approached the police, a certain General Libya, where he's told him about...
Lishabani,
yes, pardon me, where he basically told him about this particular incident and what happened at that particular time. And he says one of the concerns that he had was that there was now a rumor that he may have been at the hostel, and he gave them the information, but also at a later stage, General Lishabani came back and said, well, I can tell you that the information that you've given me is actually true.
So in describing his relationship with these individuals, you know, Zungu has been in the police force for 12 years now, I understand. So that's close on the time that this case has been running for. So he would have been a junior police officer at the time that Sizwe Zungu's murder happened. How does he then explain whatever historic relationships he may have had with the accused? I would imagine it would be important for him to do that, because in telling the court what he has, he also, of course, is raising a level of suspicion around himself and his own credibility in this matter.
Absolutely. You would have heard just initially when he started with his testimony detailing the relationship, firstly, with the man who brought him at the hostel. This was now Gwabini, who he says is his nephew. And then at a later stage saying that when I got there, there were 3 people, there were 3 of the accused, and one of them, accused number 1, is my neighbor in Nongoma, in KwaZulu-Natal. I know him because he's my neighbor. And then accused number 2 is Bongani Ntanzi, obviously, who also comes from Nongoma. I know them from back at home in KwaZulu-Natal. And then he says, I know the rest of the accused from Gauteng, in particular from Vosloorus.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see then what happens as this particular witness gives evidence. The cross-examination certainly promises to be very interesting.